As a company, we're actually quite used to doing difficult installs remotely. In fact, a single box sale generally these days is actually quite easy. Combination of a appliance level device, well-trained resellers, and very good assistance from our support department means that we can pretty much ensure middle of the desert, middle of nowhere, not a problem. Obviously, this situation has changed a little bit of how we do business or how we approach quite difficult things. And recently we've had to deploy one of our, what I would say the most complicated system that we build, a Cloak DR system. And we've had to deploy that into Asia with absolutely no training for the poor distributor at this point. Really no way to get any engineer from the UK, and ordinarily myself I would be out there assisting or even doing the install with them. So none of that was possible because of COVID, and we obviously need to carry on doing business because we're seeing good demand in terms of people wanting to buy stuff in Asia. Things have picked up in that territory a little bit, and we came up against this stumbling block of how do we deploy something very complicated. So we've now successfully done that, and as I say, the combination of our support resources that we have here and the experience of doing that, plus even the simplicity of something that is cool as a system that literally is an active failover and does everything in the background and is the best DR solution, can be done by somebody who hasn't been trained and somebody who is not necessarily speaking English. We're having to do a lot through text, but the combination of everybody working together has managed to do this install in less than a week. In fact, in terms of deployment days, we're about 3 days to do it, which is kind of similar to what we would be doing if we were on site there. Yeah, I think ordinarily you would have a reseller that was used to the hardware, or had seen the hardware, had seen the GUI, had the training, and kind of knew from a single box point of view what they were going to come up against. In this case, they didn't. So they literally had the boxes delivered, and it's like, oh, this is something new. So we have quick start guides and we have a lot of things built into the system that will make it easy for somebody to get something up and running. But the thing with Cloak is not only is it 2 units working together, it's also working with very complicated networking. So we're using an MLAG mesh, which basically gives full resilience across switches, across storage, and even down to the client connections. And it also increases the performance that can be delivered out through the system in a very intelligent way. But it does put a lot of emphasis on the networking. And ordinarily, it's not something you would approach in this fashion. But we had the equipment delivered here. We build all the system as a complete system, and then we shipped it out to there. So it was very much a case of, these are these connectors, this is where it goes, all the rest of it. So, yes, I've created very thorough documentation, numbering and all the rest of it to go with it. But at the end of the day, it is a pretty simple process of following steps. And the point we got to, the system being up, and now the customer's very happy with the system. We've never actually been to that country or deployed it physically ourselves, and yet it still can be done. So it's, in these times, I think that's extremely important. Actually, in this particular requirement, they were replacing another system that was meant to be quite well protected, gave them a lot of problems, and just generally supporting it and all the rest of it meant that they were looking for another system towards the end of last year. So I don't really think it was tied into COVID, but of course, at the point of ordering, everything being happy, I was looking for my visas and all the rest of it to go there, and it turned out that that wasn't going to happen. And it was pretty clear within the first parts of this year that it definitely wasn't going to happen, and it was going to get stretched out. So we had to make the jump to doing it remotely. And so the kit was all shipped over there, engineers sorted out that end, language barriers covered, and yeah, I think it's been a really impressive thing to see both companies working together and getting something like that done. Yeah, I mean, with our systems, you could say that 90% of things we can deal with remotely. That's a function of the IPMI built into our systems and the fact that we can get to almost anything remotely. Sure, we need somebody to physically put a hard drive in or, plug a cable in, but actually we can boot up, shut down, check the BIOS, do all sorts of stuff remotely. So even with a deployment like this, we knew that we were going to have a certain amount of control in the deployment stages, and now that it's done and we've got a separate network for all of the support sides of all the different pieces of hardware, remoting in from the UK or from wherever is actually quite a simple process. We can monitor everything in the system, we know what's going on, and if there is any problems, we can deal with them very quickly. But so far, no issues. Yeah, I mean, sadly, the reality is we're going to be working and living in a very different way. And, as a storage company, we've always tried to make it, even from early days when I was transitioning from doing very long-winded SAN installations to a very quick space installation, I couldn't quite get my head around the sort of 2 days versus like an hour, and we've always pushed to have an appliance level box, so that you could send journalists out into the field and they would feel confident they didn't have to have an IT department follow them or anything like that. And so, it wasn't too off-putting, but just the complexity of the system and really the fact that we'd never gone and physically trained their engineers, which we'd always do. Those were really the big hurdles. But I think we've done well. The dealer has learned a lot very quickly. And I think the initial thing was they were quite scared about the whole situation and all the things that could go wrong. But having done this, I think that it's inspired a lot of confidence in them. And it's demonstrated that really in the future with any deployment like this, if we are all held back as we are now or in similar ways, it's actually not really a problem for us. We've munched up a lot of content, and a lot of content creation now needs to be done. And whether that will be done in the same way, probably not. But can we adapt and can we provide storage to help those people create? Absolutely we can.